Happy to welcome Rich for afternoon session.
Yay.
And I was listening to Rich talking on John Vervaeke's podcast and then some other ones. I was following him around a little bit online, and I found myself continually talking to the videos. Don't you know about blue sky? So I thought he needs to be here. So yeah, I'm really happy. Yeah, I think you'll hear what I heard. He's still wanting to figure out what I heard, so I think you'll hear what I heard. Welcome.
Thank you. And I also just want to say I so appreciate this opportunity to talk with you all. Your time is, I know, valuable, and I just feel really privileged to be able to speak. Thank you so much. So this talk I want to give is, I want to frame it. Well, first what I want to do is start with, Michael, what you did last night, which was to spend a few moments introducing yourself. And normally, or typically, sometimes we have a chance to do that prior to getting up and speaking, and I didn't get a chance to do that. So I thought I would take your lead on that sort of thoughtful, calm self-introduction so that you could sort of know who you're listening to. No, I don't need to do that, but I'll try to make it brief. But even before I do that, I want to back up and say that everything I'm about to say, everything that I'm going to offer, this is an offering in the spirit that Michael was talking about last night, an offering before taking. And I'm going to be taking your time and attention, so I want this to be an offering. I also just want to say that everything that I am going to offer, everything that I'm going to share with you comes from love. There's just no other way to, at the bottom of all of this, this is a project, a lifelong project of love, and I think that matters. I didn't do this, I didn't study, I didn't work for money or for recognition or for, it was just for love. I love nature. I love being in it. I love thinking about it. I love learning about it. I've discovered that learning about nature is really about self-discovery. And I want to share that love. And I want to invite other people to feel that love in some way. I just think it's so instrumental in the meta-crisis issue. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you can trust this because it's come from nothing less than love. I just think that matters. So I'm not really here to, my goal is not to really lead or to change your mind. This is coming from the conversation that happened earlier. It's really just about finding the others who are ready and willing and have the bandwidth to share in an experience of identity with nature. So I frame this as intelligence. The intelligence, there are lots of different ways. I've been in a lot of arguments with Claude lately about this. But has anyone heard of artificial intelligence? So it's pretty out there. It's sort of a popular topic right now. So I thought I would frame this theory in terms of intelligence. And it turns out that what the Earthling Theory is, which I'm going to tell you, is a story of intelligence. It's really a theory of humanity, grounded in the provenance of intelligence. There's some theory out there going around about consciousness first, they call it, which is that the world is imbued with a consciousness. I might just tweak that a little, say I think it's imbued with intelligence, that intelligence is primary, that there's an intelligence working in these rocks that ultimately, through forces of continuity, becomes our intelligence. And so that's what we're getting at, is that. How does that statement land with people? That humans are the most earthly of earthlings. Do you believe that? I'm going to try and convince you of it, but it's hard to believe that right now, given you believe me. I want to. You want to believe. Great, that's a good start. But that's what I'm going to try and convince you of, is that we actually are. We're just a little bit lost. We've just gotten off the track a little bit. I also wanted to just take a minute to give you this sentence And by the way, tomorrow I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence, and this is kind of the setup. So we have something to refer back to in our intelligence. That knowing and embodying our provenance of natural intelligence offers the best inoculation against the harms of artificial intelligence. I'm just going to leave it at that, but I wanted it to be said. I founded a philosophy, I guess you could call it, that I call Oika, which comes from the Greek word oikos, which Sean was talking about earlier. Oikos itself is a Greek word that meant the house. And given the sort of patriarchal features of ancient Greek culture, what oikos actually meant was the house and all the stuff in it, the possessions. So it was sort of this, but it also meant the possessions also included like the people, the possession of the wife, the kids, the furniture, the slaves, all of it. So I didn't want to stick with oikos, so I came with oika, which is a way to soften it, make it more inclusive. And so I'm just going to briefly tell you, so essentially all of my life's work, which has been a while now, has boiled down to 3 principles. And I think if we can embody these principles, we've gone a long way toward addressing, or at least responding, to the meta-crisis. Continuity. So the story that I'm going to tell, so the way I establish continuity, it's about establishing continuity in the identity of us. And the way I do that is by telling a story of continuity, which you've heard. I'm sure Brian Swim gave you that. And I'm going to revisit that story, but I'm going to do it from a very idiosyncratic, meaning unique to me, interpretation. But so that's the first one. Relationality is the second. That everything, and I'm going to try and convince you of this, that everything that is emanates from. And I know that there are traditions that have homed in on this principle, right relations and things like Buddhist ideas. But my path to these same insights is simply through studying nature. I'm not really an academic. I'm an accidental academic. I'm a recovering academic. And so, but and I'm going to admit something. I haven't really read any books. Any of these books that are being mentioned. That's not something I'm proud of, but it's just I'm too busy out there with it, studying it, not so-and-sos. And I know I forfeit much because of that, but I also gain a lot by being in direct first-person relationship with these subjects. So forgive me if I don't cite people that you want me to cite. I will cite if it comes to me. But so relationality, is incredibly potent, the driving creative impulse of the universe, and we can experience it anytime we want. And the third is entanglement, and I find this is the most sort of fun and exciting one right now. It's sort of the frontier of thinking. This gets down to enactivist principles, but I don't want to do this. I just wanted to give a quick overview. These are the 3 principles that I think if we can feel these, it will help us shift our identity into better alignment with nature. So this is the story of the universe depicted as a spiral. I use this. This is how I establish continuity. This is a story of continuity. And it's kind of represented here a little bit. I've got several sort of representatives of the different, this is a spiral. These are rocks and organisms. Normally I would have a bit more. This is a recently acquired assortment. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go along this whole story, and I'm going to stop at just a couple of places, well, let's say 5 in total. I'm going to explore the continuity, the relationality, entanglement of each one of these sort of spots along the way of this journey. I'll try to go quick because I want to focus on the earthling part. So, obviously it starts in a big mystery, and that mystery is still with us today. I'm going to tell you a lot about what we know, but what we know pales in comparison to what we don't know. And that's just a basic admission of ignorance, that this whole thing is immersed in a mystery. And the thing about mystery is we don't know what it is. I know that. But that sounds like a tautology. But we do know that something happened, and there was this rapid period of inflation where lots of things were getting worked out. I don't like to call them fundamental laws of nature. They're more about patterns, patterns that matter, patterns that are aligned enough to distill continuity, basically, persistence. And that's the intelligence that I'm talking about. Here it is, it's already working. Nuclear forces, the strong and weak nuclear force, electromagnetism, the Yankee suck, gravity, that's all in there right now. So these are the sort of patterns at the beginning of the universe in right relation. And one of the first things that we have discovered at about 380,000 years, so our first stop, is that what's called the cosmic microwave background radiation. Just to give you a little bit of orientation, there's a satellite, and it's looking back in space and back through time, through the stars that we first see, and as we go back this way, we're actually going back in time. Then there's a period here where it's dark before the first stars, and then at 13.8 billion years ago, we have this Big Bang, and in between the Big Bang and us is this layer here that looks like a blue disk. It's called the cosmic microwave background radiation. And that's the picture that we've taken. We took it with that satellite. So I think I have a little depiction of how this works. Here it is here. So this is the satellite. We've sent it up. It's called the Planck satellite. And it spins, and it's tuned to see in the microwave band of light. We see invisible light. This thing sees in the microwave. As it spins, it records what it sees, the light. The light also has imprinted in it temperature. So temperature of light is recorded, and we get this image. We lay it flat. It becomes an oval. And then we can filter the light, take out the errant sort of the errant light that's pollution in the atmosphere. We can take out the Milky Way galaxy. We end up with that image. That's what that is. So it's a picture of the early universe. And if we could look out there now beyond those trees, we'd see it in the background. That's the thing we'd see all the way behind everything else. That's why they call it the background radiation. But I'm trained as an ecologist, which means I'm trained to see relationships. That's what ecologists study. Usually they study, birds and trees and brooks and, how these processes relate. But I study the whole, like relationships, these ecological dynamics that we've discovered. It turns out they operate across all these dimensions, even into the human realms of ideas and things like that. So here we have this cosmic, so what we're looking at here, just so we know, is minutely differing temperature of the different light. The point to take home here is that it could be uniform. If it were uniform, like this table, right, it didn't have any fluctuations in it, there would be no relationships, because one thing would be very much the same as the other thing. There's no opportunity for a relationship to happen. But because of those tiny little fluctuations, those are the primordial relationships. And if you believe in continuity, and I do, you realize that though our relationships, I just did a thing with Paprika, and we kind of have a relationship. Well, our relationship, as nascent as it is in here. It's in there. It's implicit. These are the first relationships. And what it proves, or what it shows, is that the cosmos, the driving engine of creativity, is relationship. That's the primordial ecology of light. Those relationships, if you let them play out, see if this is going to work. Oh, sorry. This is a slide of what that evolves into, but it's the wrong slide. This is actually a brain scan of a rat. It actually looks like that, but you can see the continuity there, the fractal. Anyway, that's a bit of a distraction. And if I just let it play, I think you'll see what's happening there in that light is that hydrogen and helium and gravity are all in relationship, and they're in right relationship to produce beings or features that persist over time. And in this case, it's stars and galaxies and things like that. But what I really wanted to show you is how that pattern becomes the night sky. Because there's a critical part that no one ever teaches us. I know this because I was educated in the cosmic microwave, but what no one ever said, what they didn't tell me, they told me all about the temperature differentials and the science of how we got this image, but they didn't tell me that the first stars of the universe tended to be in the blue areas because there was less energy there, it's cooler, things can come together more easily, and that's where the first stars form. So the first starry night would have had this sort of pattern to it. It doesn't anymore because stars live and die and they change. But do you see that there's a continuity between this, the cosmic microwave background radiation, and the stars and the way that they're arranged, the patterns? That's the continuity. You see, the intelligence that organizes hydrogen and helium is on a continuum that we can still see in the night sky tonight. That's what I'm trying to convey here, and I think it's an essential part. So that's what I'm trying to say, is that the first starry night is patterned, is blueprinted by the earliest light of the cosmos. That picture that we took is only 380,000 years after the Big Bang. That's not even a blink in cosmic time. But the first thing the universe does that we can discern is start having relationships and creating through those relationships. That's what I mean by continuity and relationality. Both of those things are expressed here, the continuity and the relationality. And by the way, it's the quality of the relationships that sort of guide the quality of the emergent features. That's important to know. So how do I know this? My method of doing science, which is indistinguishable from my spirituality, is to feel the science in the world. And this insight came to me as I was reading J. Manley Hopkins. He has a poem, "Glory be to God for dappled things, for skies a coupled color as a brinded cow, for rose moles all in stipple upon trout that swim." He wrote this in 1877. And as I had this on, I'm in my hammock here, and I'm reading this, and I'm thinking about the cosmic microwave, and I listen, and I look, and I see, this is what he's talking about. He's talking about how that pattern, all stipple upon trout that swim. Do you see that cosmic microwave background, scientific thing, became all of the relationships that I'm now enmeshed in? This isn't science that separates us. I'm giving you the science that actually confirms and affirms how we feel when we feel like we are entangled in this web. Anyway, it's a phenomenological kind of science to feel this reality. So that's step one. That's the cosmic microwave background radiation. The next one here, what do I have it as? Oh, planetary accretion. So stars, as I said, they come into existence through gravitational forces pulling them together. They ignite, nucleosynthesis starts. That's how elements are formed. It's the story continues. The story of relationships continues. And in our particular sort of neighborhood here, we had a star ignite after a supernova, and there's lots of rubble around from the supernova. And in the middle, a star ignites. And what's happening here is you're seeing right relationships start to play out. So if I kind of go ahead here, you'll see this becomes something much more familiar, which is planets evolving around a sun in relationship to that star. And these aren't to scale, but they give you a sense of how relationality doesn't just work at the scale of the cosmic microwave background radiation, it's also operating at the scale of planetary dynamics here. Okay, so I'm trying to establish continuity of that relationality, and the creative sort of life force of the universe is still operating here. This is 4.6 billion years ago. How do we know this? We've actually now recently, taken a picture. I'm not going to go back to that, I guess. We have evidence. I want to get to Earthling Theory. That's why I'm rushing through this. So now we're going to jump ahead here to another moment in this story where something really interesting happened. This is before life. And this is intelligence, by the way. So, some people will critique me and say, well, how could there be intelligence before us? Actually, our intelligence is just the latest manifestation of an intelligence that's been going since the big mystery. But something that happened on this planet that you saw there evolving is little pools of water formed, which is a whole other story. I mean, I could stop at a million places on this thing. So I'm jumping ahead to this quiet, or let's say it's not that quiet, but it's a warm pool of water. Water has its own incredible story. And dissolved in that water are certain molecules that have self-organized through right relationship and found their own persistence. And a couple of that molecules look something like this. These are called liposomes. They're a molecule that has one end is hydrophobic, meaning it doesn't like water, and then the other one does like water. If you take these and you let them free sort of associate in water, they'll naturally tend to form into these sheets. In the middle is the hydrophobic, it's the exterior out there that has the water, so the interior of this feature has hydrophobic in the middle and then hydrophilic at the ends, and it just creates this natural sheet. It's called a phospholipid bilayer. This is pre-human intelligence operating on an early Earth. And if you give it enough time, these relationships, if you suspend, I'm going to skip ahead. If you suspend that feature, this feature, that's the same thing, the phospholipid, you just let it float freely. Occasionally, given millions of years of chance, occasionally the two ends might just come together like that. And in that moment, that is the first instance, that we know of an interior space and an exterior space. That's the emergence of interiority. We talk about interiority. Here it is. Like, that's our interiority, given enough time. Does that make sense? Like, when I think, like, it's because this happened, because the phospholipid bilayer did its thing, 3.5 billion years ago, we can now have an interiority. We can think. This is what entanglement's sort of speaking to. So maybe you'll just take that at face value for now. I'm trying to get to Earthling Theory. And then also Sean mentioned this great oxygenation event. This one, I have a representative, and I can pass this around. These are some of those. This is a fossil of some of the very earliest photosynthesizing algae. It's called a stromatolite. And it was responsible for much of the oxygen production that precipitated in the atmospheric change called the Great Oxidation Event. So what ends up happening is, prior to this photosynthesis, this very successful organism creating oxygen and pumping it into the atmosphere, iron, free-ranging iron ions could exist in Fe. But what happens if you leave steel out, iron out? It rusts, unless there's no oxygen. And so we have rocks that represent the relationship between that organism, and this is a deposit. This is actually a stand-in for the deposit, but this is a deposit of sediments underneath the ocean that show how, when enough oxygen accumulated in the atmosphere and saturated the ocean, suddenly that free-ranging iron atoms, they rusted. And when they rusted, they precipitated out in these layers. And so we have rocks that tell this story of this relationship. Photosynthesis itself is this incredible endosymbiotic event. But the point is that the Earth is recording this change from this, what would be toxic to us, atmosphere, into one that is infused with oxygen that allows multicellular organisms to thrive. So there's a right relationship happening here that we are the beneficiaries of through this process. And that's how we get a verdant world. So I'm just trying to get to this point here. So now, this is where the lecture actually starts, at Earthling Theory. So we've got this whole incredibly diverse and dense scenarios of relationships that play out over cosmic time, and we find ourselves here. So this is about 6 or 7 million years ago. There was a tribe or a species. This is called Sahelanthropus chadensis. Their fossils are found in Central Africa, and I like to imagine that there's a female in this group, and I call her Oika. Give her that name. And one day she's sitting up in the trees. Remember, this is about the provenance of human intelligence. She's sitting in the trees and she's looking down and she's scanning for what's out there and what could potentially hurt her, and she sees berries, some red berries, and she imagines, and I use that word deliberately, that she's imagining what those berries might taste like. And so she comes down from the trees, and because she's, bipedal and probably social, some of her relatives, maybe some offspring, some sisters, some bachelor males who are always sort of hovering around, they go down with her, and this is a hypothetical story, but it could have happened, and they go and they partake in the berries, and they're rewarded with that. And what they do is they keep going. So they from those berries, they go down the river to the next berries. And eventually, they get so far that they get separated from their original group. But it's that decision by Oika, using her imagination, following the lure of nature, right? That lures her down, and the social ties that bring the others with her. That's the beginning of a great diaspora, the human diaspora. And so what we see is that, and there's this is all documented paleontologically, but in general, the story is that they set out and they come down from the trees, and they cross the riparian zones, and as they interact with each one of these habitats, they come into right relation. If they hadn't, we wouldn't be here. So I'm going to assume that they did come into right relationship, and they thrived. And they thrived by being in right relation and learning from each of the habitats. In other words, the intelligence that's implicit in the habitat got communicated to the hominid. Does that make sense? So, and then it changed them. So this is Australopithecine. This is Lucy, about 3.8 billion years ago. The world has changed the primate, and that's the first step in what we call niche construction. When the world changes the organism and the organism changes the world, that's niche construction. Whenever you hear somebody talk about niche construction, make a note of where they start. Because a lot of times, the way it was taught to me was that organisms change their habitat, and habitats change the organism. That's ass backwards. You see, it matters. The direction matters because it happened environment first. We received the intelligence from them, and then it changed us, and then we changed it. It wasn't the other way around. People, listen to the way people talk. Noah Yuval Harari talks about story being this incredible skill of humans, and we use it to dominate and manipulate the environment. He's got it wrong. He never talks about where that capacity for story comes from. He just assumes it's in the human. Actually, no, the humans got it from the habitats. And we've lost sight of that. We've got it backwards, our carts before our horse. Anyway, the story continues, and each one of these habitats is impinging its intelligence. And we have the fossil record to prove this. These are the footprints of a story right here. Something that happened on the plains of Africa in this fossilized ash bed. You can see the footprints there. And they tell a story. They tell a story of a species crossing new habitats. And here's the way I like to imagine it. There's a family of primates, and they're out there doing their thing. And you see he's got some seed pods there. And this story is recorded in the footprints. But I can imagine one of them looking down and seeing a rock. And let's say it's this female, and she imagines that, boy, if I hit this rock with this rock, it creates a surface that I can use to peel the husk off of these seeds, and we can all eat them. And then so this emerges. This is called an Oldowan a chopper, a stone chopper. It's quite crude, but this is what this actually is. It's literally the earth presenting parts of itself to teach the human being. This is where we got storytelling, Yuval. We get it from the earth, because in order to do this, whoever did it had to say, if I hit this, this will happen, that will happen, and we'll get this. That's a series of consequences, causal things that happen over time. That's a story. That's a plot. That's what taught us how to do that, were the stones. That's where we get our capacity for storytelling, Yuval. And so this is Homo. Normally I would have skulls here to show this, but this is Homo habilis, taking it to the next level. So we go from this to this. Did you feel that? Could you feel the difference between that and that? So here's a species that has storytelling ability, and here's a species that knows how to appreciate symmetry and beauty. And again, it's the stones, though, teaching us this. This is the basis of Earthling theory. And by the way, this is a sharp edge all the way around. It might have been more effective if it didn't have a sharp edge all the way around. But whoever made this said, the symmetry and the beauty is more important than the utility. That's pretty awesome, that even at this point, millions of years ago, we had this capacity for art appreciation. The story continues. The species now that has the skills of storytelling and aesthetic appreciation sets out on this journey. The journey continues. Think about all the habitats we're crossing and having this right relationship with. And then we go from this kind of a tool to this kind of a tool. This is called a Mousterian axe or tool. And what this is, what I'm trying to depict here, is the tool that whoever made this wants is this last one, that one, right? But they had to take a stone, hit it with another stone, to create a surface that the last blow would be the one that creates the tool. That's having to see one thing, this thing, in terms of the core. Does that make sense? What is that the definition of? To see one thing in terms of another. To see one thing in terms of another thing. We talked about it, metaphor. So here's this is the birth of metaphor. This would end up as Shakespeare. Like, this is where we get this, from the stones. It's funny, I presented this lecture in 2014 called Shakespeare in the Cave, and it was this exact same thing, and it was at a CIS event. Anyway, so that's the story of how, and this is just one of countless stories of how the earth has taught us to be human. And so we set out across the world, and here's what's cool. When an organism that has the capacity for this, and this aesthetic appreciation, and this metaphor, and it sets out across the world and it encounters this, it creates this, like art. I just find it amazing that some of our earliest art, these capacities that the earth has endowed us with, we use to express our intimate relationship with the planet itself through early forms of art. So when we see this, we create that. And when we see this, it ends up this. Here's a cool one. When we see this, we see this. Now what this is when they found this is just one disc. On one side is the standing gazelle, and on the bottom is the one that they originally interpreted, this is a hunting scene, and someone has killed the thing, and it's lying down. But then they realized if you do this, it tells a different story. Like, this is the first animation. This is of a gazelle stotting. If you've ever seen a gazelle that's trying to communicate its fitness to the world, that's what it does, is it stots. It does this thing where it goes like that. I just find it amazing that the earth has given us this capacity to do all of this stuff, and it ends up like that. So here's the basis of Earthling theory. A species, hominid species, comes out of the trees, and then it crosses every habitat on this planet. No other species has done this. This is unique to us. This is our idiosyncratic inheritance from the earth. It is the thing that has provided the intelligence that has allowed us to thrive in every habitat. That is the basis of Earthling theory, through the forests, amidst the glaciers, across the deserts. That is my claim, that we are the most earthly of earthlings. I love dogs. I love slime molds. I love dolphins and crickets. But none of them did this. We did this. This is our inheritance. And this is the provenance of our intelligence. And I think, like, tomorrow we'll get into how this kind of intelligence is going to intersect with artificial intelligence and why they're different, I hope. Let's see, so I'm way ahead of time here. If you need any evidence for this, this is just a graphical image of the human family tree. That split where Oika came down from the trees and split from the other group. That other group that we left behind, that Oika left behind, went on to become the chimps. They never did this journey. They never really left the trees. And that's why they still live that way, because they didn't have the opportunity to have the relationship with every habitat, whereas we did. And that's my point. So that's it in a nutshell. That's Earthling theory. The question is, what do we do? And so I just wanted to I'm just going to let this run. But how do I know? This came to me really just about a year and a half ago or so, that my journey, the reason this makes sense to me, the reason this even came to me was my journey is a tiny little reflection of the human journey. My diaspora through all of these habitats reflects all the habitats that the humans went through. So as an ecologist, studied in all these habitats, and I'm a strange kind of ecologist because I sit and I listen. I just let it speak, and because I love it. I just want to be with it. And throughout all those years and all those different habitats, suddenly this idea came to me. So I can't cite someone else really for that, other than nature itself was the thing that communicated this to me. So there it is. That's my claim. That's my what's that?
I have a challenge for you.
Great. Let's hear it.
Are bees not also the creatures that traverse the entire planet? And they do so in a regenerative fashion.
Bees?
Parasitic fashion.
Bees?
Bees.
My point is that this is an ancestry, lineage story. They didn't do it like we did. Like, I can't cite to you the evolutionary history of bees. Can you? Can you tell us what it is? Okay. But my assumption is that they're specialized. They've become specialized and fine-tuned, for what they do. That's not our trajectory. Our trajectory, for whatever reason, in the mind of Oika, that she imagined, she used, a certain neurological sort of repertoire, a certain neurological infrastructure to imagine something and go and do it. She followed the cue, the lure. Bees, I would imagine, don't. Insects may populate all habitats, but they didn't have this particular lineage that we have.
Is it a metacognition they're talking about?
Who?
The difference of human earthlings.
Is it a metacog? What do you mean? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Because you're saying that bees may have a niche in how they relate, they can interact with the world, but they lack, maybe, potentially, of this process of observing their own behaviors and coming to understanding of it.
I think metacognition, in the way you've just, is an accumulation, a cumulatory expression of nature's intelligence. Bees have a different lineage. They didn't inhabit and have these kinds of relationships with every habitat on the planet. That's all I know. I can't speak to bee evolution, but they're insects.
Yeah, I would agree with what Paprika's proposing from what I've studied through bees. So the person who introduced me to that was Harold Bloom, good name for a guy who writes the Global Brain. And he was originally an entomologist, and so he proposes. So what I would sort of approaching things through your perspective is, I also am a Gaian, and I think that Gaia has evolved bees for a different purpose than for humans. But in fact, Gaia has populated every geology and geography of the earth with bees. They adapt to their local conditions, and they're an aggregate insect, so they actually have something more than just the individual bee mind. They have a hive mind, and our research, of which there is an enormous amount of research about bees since of the 1800s, shows that they do learn. And they have actually got, in my opinion, a better sustainability strategy than humans. And I'm curious when humans are going to get as good sustainability strategy as the bees.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, and I also notice from the question and the line here that I may be being misunderstood what I'm saying. This is not an argument for some kind of human exceptionalism but it is an argument we are exceptionally attuned. Do you see what I mean? And we have lost that. We have somehow become disconnected from our story that makes us a part of that Gaian intelligence. So I just want to be clear about that. I'm not making the classic claim of those who came before me in that regard. I completely adore and love, and respect, admire, and fascinated by the intelligence of all beings on this planet. But we do have a lineage, and this is a relatively accurate depiction of our lineage. And I'm saying that we too, through this relationship, story of relationship, are invited to become as much of the part of that story as the bees, who we have look, trust me, it breaks my heart in ways I can't even describe how we've become disconnected from that intelligence. In fact, this is an attempt to establish continuity with that intelligence, that relational intelligence. So I'm not taking from the bees here in any way. No, I know. But I just want to be clear that this whole thing is about re-entering into this process with all of the gifts that the earth has endowed upon us through our right relationships that we've forgotten. That's why we're lost. We have orphaned ourselves because they don't teach this story of our unique, sequential, intimate, right relationship with every habitat on this planet. That is what has endowed us with the capacity to imagine, to dream up myths, to do what we do. That's what makes us human. We are earthlings in a real way. And there's a story that we could be telling to reestablish our connection to that. So,
Can I ask you why it matters who the mostest?
who's what? This has nothing to do with being the mostest.
Well, it says that.
Oh, well, I do think that that's true. Now, that might just me being lazy or not anticipating this line of challenge. The reason I say it that way is because we don't think we are. We think we're separate from it. I'm trying to give those who would think that a way to flip it and say, oh, actually, we are so deeply embedded. Whereas it as deeply embedded as any organism. I appreciate that you pointing this out to me. But in fact, my position is not the one you think it is, if that's the complaint. My position is that we are uniquely shaped by the earth to be who we are.
Same with animals. They're uniquely shaped by the earth.
That's true, but
Coming from
I
the
don't.
ocean, moving towards,
Okay, but I want to take ownership in a belonging sense. Look, this is what it means to feel indigeneity, is to feel like I am an active recipient and participant of an intelligence that's greater than mine. In fact, that my intelligence is an expression of that intelligence, as is the bee, as are the bees. I'm not going to ever admit that I don't love bees as much as I love humans. So you can forget that. Now, I might fail to communicate that, in which case, hey, I asked for it. But that isn't really what I'm saying. I'm asking us to take ownership of our belonging in a way that contradicts the way we've done it such to date.
How about if you just said humans are earthlings?
Or the most humans of Earthling.
I suppose I could, but it wouldn't have triggered this conversation, I guess.
I feel like I'm getting around with my initial resistance after your explanation. I think, it's like speaking to this specific group was the very key bit, because in any other group or most other groups, you would anticipate the resistance coming from the angle of for the disremembrance of our connections and continuity. But this group probably suffers a little bit more on the shame and hurt and regrets and all of those self-critical vehicle in our doings and undoings. Yeah, so, but I'm getting around and appreciating
It's probably a poor choice of words, all right,
for this group.
for this group.
We're tough crowd.
Oh, that's fine, I appreciate that, but I'm not also going to relinquish
No.
my,
I would like also to support, in a sense, like something of this. I have to say that I resonate a lot with the also your journey through. Also went through cosmology to ecology in my studies, and what I was kind of surprised, but kind of came to understand when I first arrived to academic conferences of ecologists, is the unhumanistic views, like the despair that many ecologists sense towards human beings, like as we are truly being kind of the perspective that we are external forces. In most of the ecologist models, human beings are kind of external forces on nature. We are aliens, and we are destroying nature as if we are kind of gods, coming from kind of other, like, solar system. But and your endeavor is also to bring us back to be a part of this story of this. But what I'm still lacking is there is another bifurcation of human beings which is the bifurcations of cultures, which is not kind of not seen in the diagram that you've watched. Like that, there is the genetic bifurcation of Homo sapiens and like humanoids from the other apes that were staying in their ecological birthplaces. But then there is also the bifurcation, the very, very rich bifurcation of cultures themselves. And this is a whole new story of evolution, which is have some similarity, in genetic evolutionary theory, but also have some particularities of how human beings were evolved culturally. So, because I think that one of the struggles I think that we're talking about is that the current culture, the overarching culture, is not seeing this, doesn't see human beings as part of nature.
yeah.
And this is a cultural bifurcation that we
For sure.
need to discuss.
For sure. Yeah, and maybe I could have, indicated that as such better. That I'm really just trying to address the problematic culture. Yeah. Thank you.
Also, if we come from chimps and evolved from that, then aren't we also animals, which means we are intrinsically also the most earthly of earthlings?
Okay, I got tripped up on the first part because we haven't evolved from chimps. We share a common ancestor with chimps, which means that chimps and us have evolved from Sahelanthropus. Do you see what I mean? So that might be functionally, that might provide a functional answer to your question. What was the second part?
That if we have common ancestors with animals, then we are also beings of the earth, like animals are, which is
Well,
to
yeah.
your point.
That's my point, yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah.
they're
But we
common.
are unique. Look at us.
Right.
Look at us. Not just our bodies, but the cultures and what we've created. And I love
think
bees. I love slime molds. I love stromatolites, but they're not doing what we're doing. We need to get a grip on what we're doing and place it back into the context of the story of the planet. Sorry, one second.
When I zoom in on the word most,
Yeah. Don't do that.
no, I think it should be.
Okay, great. Go ahead, do that.
You know, does a fish know it's in water? You know, there's something in the discussion in all of this about where we are centered, where we are self-aware. When I look at most, it's because we seem to be, and I've only got limited experience with different beings, but we have the capacity, this incredible thing that is going on, that gave us the capacity to look where we are, who we are, all of that. I don't know that a bear knows it's a bear, or its environment. It knows its environment. It knows it incredibly. But does it see how it fits into?
Yeah,
You know, this is where, like, self-awareness is in that word most to me.
that's beautiful. Thank you. And that's the spirit. If we're going to focus on it, that is the one I would like to. So thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's a gift. It's all a gift. The self-awareness, in fact, I think is a uniquely human trait, but it's not ours alone, is my point. In fact, we get it through our relationship with the world. That's written in to the creative life force of the cosmos, as far as I can tell. Like, that's where we get it, and we should be grateful. And we should align with it through that gift. That's my point. The culture we're in is problematic. Don't take it the other way. Hold on a sec, because she had her hand up.
So actually, I had very similar reflection that I think that all species are very unique in their own form, but the consciousness of awareness, who we are, is very specific and it's different from others. But on the other hand, we are so limited that we don't know what's happening within themselves. You know?
I think we've become limited. You know what I mean? I think we've been distracted from our unique and beautiful lineage here. Like, we can reclaim it, we can restore it, and the first part of what you said was, of course, they're all unique. That's what I'm trying to say. We're especially unique, and that's okay.
Is there another organization or organism on Earth that has the propensity for willful destruction of its own environment at its own detriment the way we do? The cannibalization of our own resources?
I'm sure you could pick something, some insect or some, parasitic thing that does that, viruses, things like that. I'm not making that kind of a claim, but we do. The question is why, and the question is, I think the response is because we've lost sight of who we've become disconnected.
Yeah, I think a lot about the why. I'm just trying to, is there another organism that we behave like? I always think of a cancer cell, that we behave like cancer cells, where we just consume the very things that are keeping us alive.
I wouldn't say we do that. I say we find right relationship, except when we don't. And we happen to be in a period where we've been out of right relationship with it for a long time. But this is a 6 million year story of us being in right relation. And I don't want to jettison that. In fact, I want to remember it as a mode of healing from that period.
I really appreciate that now, actually. Coming back around, I do think as part of this group, often we talk about the human-world relation from a place of shame because of our awareness is so heightened. And that doesn't help often in how we imagine, using a word, possible potential actions to take and to form the right relation again.
Okay,
once more.
I don't think we should be acting out of shame. I think we should be acting
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
out of love.
Yeah, I'm coming around to your choice of words here because it's helping me see where I came from with my resistance towards the word.
Yeah, I mean, with the most,
Responsibility.
yes, with the most power that the earth has endowed us with comes the most responsibility.
But, so what I was gonna say before is that there's this evolution, right, that's just natural. You've described the evolution of all things and the planet and how it peoples, right? Like that the function of the planet is to people as much as the function of the planet is to giraffe or bison, right? Like it generates these living beings that are in right relationship on this planet, sharing this space. And if we have seemingly more sentience, maybe, right? We can't really know if we have more sentience than another being, but it is unique to humans that we learn and go through stages of development and innovation and kind of massive feats of engineering and enterprise at this exponential level compared to many other species, right? So then it seems like it's also our evolutionary role in the world or on the planet to also iterate and progress beyond remembering. So it's remembering and adding, right? So it's remembering where we came from in that evolutionary stance, and then saying, okay, well, this is a different world because look what's all proliferated because we're so much further down the evolutionary chain. We can't just simply remember. We need to remember and incrementally add what next is there is to learn for our own survival, which is how we are fit to produce offspring that will also survive.
Sure, but I'm not going to dictate what that is. All I know is that this beautiful story exists. We're not remembering it. So we got to start there, I think, to some degree. Recover our earthliness. Those other questions about how to act, the activist part, I don't know. This is my journey, is to just be in love with the world and try to find others who want to love it with me. Yeah.
I really, really appreciate your love of Earth. I think that's fundamental. And tomorrow I will share some of the perspectives I have around, I think, something that follows to what you're saying, and share also how James Lovelock changed my perspective about things, and it's through evolution. So he proposes, after I was listening to him on, if anybody, I think I'm the only Canadian in the room, but I was listening to a CBC program probably about 15 years ago now, 12 years ago, and I heard James Lovelock being interviewed. And the interviewer said, after they had gone through all the disasters that humans had been inflicting on Earth, she says, well, I guess you don't have a very high opinion of humans. And he said, on the contrary, humans are Gaia's reflective organs. So that's why I wouldn't really disagree with the essence of your statement, because the evolutionary perspective he proposed is that Gaia has evolved us.
Exactly. That's my point, is that you can say we are the Earth's reflective organ, and we get that reflexivity from the Earth itself.
Exactly.
It's not given from some.
No,
it's not,
no,
it's not
evolved.
ours.
That was what was shocking to me.
Yes, it's a relational. That's why when you take these three principles, continuity, relationality, and entanglement, we'll talk about tomorrow. This is the reflection part. This is us. We are so deeply entangled with it all. Anyway, we don't have these things. We don't have an educational system to instill these. I happen to break free. I slipped through a hole in the fence, literally out of school, to learn this stuff.
I want to, you said that you were going to give a little biographical thing, and then you gave the universal biography and the universal biography. So, you don't have, if you have going somewhere,
No, I'm basically done.
yeah, I wanted to invite the story of what led you from high school to trying to get into college. That little story of the fish. I
The
love
fish.
it. Yes.
So I grew up on a little farm in a small town on the Cape Cod, sort of like a little remnant of an agricultural community, just by luck, you know. And I grew up milking goats and cleaning stalls and skipping school. Like I literally, when I was a senior in high school, they kept me back. They called me into the counselor's office and said, "Rich, you've missed 160 days of the school year. You know, like we've got 180, and you missed 160 of them." And it was because I was slipping through the fence, literally. Like there was a hole in the fence, and I used to go out there and spend the whole day out there. No one would know until they figured it out, and then they had to send out like a search party, whatever. So that's my story, and I grew up in deep, like, phenomenological and intimate contact with animals, and then I became a fisherman. I discovered there's an ocean here, and became a fisherman, and I used to haul lobster traps up, and when I would pull the trap up onto the deck and open it, it would just suddenly this other world, this cold, slippery, spiny, you know, stinky, gorgeous world, and I would just stand there sort of like immersed in it. But anyway, it was the training in the woods, in the swamps, and it was all this sort of like, just that childlike experience of being immersed in friendly communion with this stuff. And then I was to become a commercial fisherman, and suddenly I was going to kill these things and sell them, and it didn't. And then I ended up out at sea on this boat at Stellwagen Bank off the tip of Cape Cod, and everything that these habitats had taught me was at play to catch this huge bluefin tuna. And I caught one, and we hauled it up on the deck, bigger than this about the size of this table, 800-pound fish on the deck. Everyone's patting me on the back. It's going to make so much money. And I knew that it was all that relationship that I had had as a kid. And then this fish arrives, and I'm responsible for this enormous animal with this big eye. And I did cut it up and let it bleed and watched it die. And that's when I realized that I had sort of been, tricked into, and so that's when I decided to go to school. And so they couldn't keep me in school when I was supposed to be there. Now I have a PhD. And so it's just like, there's something, it was just a mismatch of timing. Oh, this bad kid, he doesn't know how to, he doesn't want to learn. What's wrong with this kid? You know what I mean? And then once I had, realized the switcheroo, the trick that culture plays on us, I wanted to learn. All I wanted to do was learn, and that's how I came to. And it was really to understand not what the tuna said to me, but how such a communication could happen. And that's what my entire sort of academic career was then devoted to. And it just happened to be science. But you remember, my science is indistinguishable from my spirituality. And so science is not the enemy. It can actually be the source of a deep sense of spirituality. So these are my projects, oika.com. And then I've started the Beautiful Futures Lab as an invitation for people like you to connect with me, and we do projects. So I have some funding, and we learn about these principles, and we integrate them into projects, cultural intervention projects. And that's what the Beautiful Futures Lab is all about. So I invite you all to check it out. And if you did want to see just a glimpse, I put the curriculum in here. Let's see if that's going to work. Is it going to work? Is that going to work? What's it say, open link? So this is the curriculum. I'll leave it up here in case you want to look at it. We go through this person, place, practice, prosper thing, and there's some of the concepts that we deal with. I don't know if you can see them or not. But so was I answering a question, or was I just rambling? I was just rambling. Okay, good.
That was Bruce's question.
Oh, yeah, that's the fish story. Yeah, it's all, there's a whole documentary about it if you want to search for it.
Give us some examples of the projects you...
Sure. Yeah, I work with a lot of artists. Actually, doing some indigenous. We're doing a cattail restoration project. I have a friend who's a Wampanoag. He's also named Robert. He's sort of my indigenous companion. Work with a lot of artists. So had a 6-year relationship with one artist where we put the principles of Oika into her practice, and we went a long way with that. Lots of film projects all over the world. What else? I can't think of them coming to mind, but there's a lot. They're documented on my website if you're really interested in seeing those projects. I'm sure there's things I'm forgetting to tell you, and they will come to me, and I'll bring them up tomorrow. So tomorrow, what I want to do is to take this idea of intelligence as inherent in the universe and have a conversation about AI. Do people use AI? Just a little bit? I think it's a huge... I want to say this, Robert, your ceremony, I went there. Like, I was with you 100%, totally keyed in on what you were doing. But halfway through, when I was looking out the window listening to the drum, it occurred to me, or at least hit me, just the injustice that happened. I became overwhelmed with this sense that there was a deep wrong thing that happened. And it occurred to me that we're maybe experiencing something of that sort again. Like, it kept me up all night, and that it's happening again, except this time all of us are the indigenous people. But this invader, or whatever you want to call it, we invented too, some of us. And so that's where this gets really serious. Like, what are we going to do with this thing? Listen to what Musk is saying. We have got to come up with something to cope with this thing that we're about to unleash on ourselves. And this sometimes feels, what I teach is it just feels pathetic in the face of that. But I also think it's the most potent thing we have, like I said, the most potent antidote to artificial intelligence, the harms of is natural intelligence. And we are the purveyors of that. We are the representatives of that. Bees are too, but bees aren't causing the problem. So we got to figure this out. And I'm desperate to find others, and to perhaps use what happened with indigenous people, a couple hundred years ago, for insight into how should we be responding to this thing that's, it's originating right here. Is that part of this, what you guys are grappling with?
Why we're here.
Okay, good. Then let's. I hope we can devote tomorrow to that. For my part of it, anyway, is finding a way to respond to that thing. And I'll just represent. I'm going to represent the bees, the trees, and the rocks.
There's another couple words from the best Navajo I know. It's called Shina Sha, and it means I'm still here.
Yeah, the Wampanoag say that too.
And there's a way of drawing from that I'm still here by the indigenous people who've gone through what they've gone through, and still able to hold the knowledge, the medicine, and be able to say, I'm still here. And there's something to me that's very inspiring about drawing on their ability. I haven't gone through anything like they've gone through in my own life. Nothing even close. Had it easy. But to meet the ones who've just had it so taken, who are seeing as you, Rich, somebody who has learned because you've intimately been involved with the natural world and the natural cycles, when you learn that way, it's even more painful to see what's happening in some ways because of that intimacy. And so I just appreciate how that is, and this idea of Shina Shah. We're still here. There's something to be trusted in that phrase to me that will also call to action. But not forget the journey that you just took us on, and to trust in whatever has brought us here. That's all.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.